From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And during our first half hour today, an extended visit with K-State's Bob Weaber about some of the featured topics at the 2018 Beef Improvement Federation Conference, where seedstock and commercial cattle producers and leading researchers and professionals gathered to talk about contemporary ideas in cattle genetic improvement. Among the highlighted topics, economic efficiency of carcass weight gain, defining and attaining sustainability in cattle production, and utilizing value-driven information as a basis for genetic selection. We'll cover all of that with Bob next. And following today's agricultural news headlines, K-State's Gus Vander Hoeven with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas. That's what's ahead on this Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Thanks for listening. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Well, it's come and gone for another year, one of the true keynote events in the beef cattle industry, and to be more precise, on the reproductive side of the cattle sector. It's the annual Beef Improvement Federation meeting, and observing its 50th anniversary this year, as a matter of fact. Now, this is a conglomeration of many interests in the industry, including several land-grant university scientists and specialists, one of which is always in attendance. Bob Weaber is with us now, cow-calf specialist, K-State Research and Extension. And we can't oversell the importance of this event, for so much information and expertise swirls around it, to put it that way, Bob.
Right, Eric. The annual Beef Improvement Federation Research Symposia and annual meeting, as it's formerly titled, is one of the must-attend meetings, at least for me and a number of producers I know, because it really brings out not only kind of the who's who list of seedstock and commercial producers, but also there's a great integration amongst, as you mentioned, the folks from land-grant institutions. So scientists are there. Scientists from USDA Meat Animal Research Center are always in attendance, as well as many of the technical staff of all the breed associations in the U.S. and Canada, Australia, but also a lot of allied industry folks. So our friends and colleagues in the AI business attend as well. Of course, for those of us in the genetics business, we're dependent on, in many cases, the reproductive physiologists of the world to help us get the delivery of our products into lots of cows. And so it's a great meeting, and the program content's always outstanding. But on an equal level is all the hall talk, right? So it's a place to kind of get the vibe of what's the next great thing coming down the pipe, or what challenges have we met. And so as a extension educator and researcher, I always come home with 3 or 4 ideas of things to do or look at and think about. And so from that standpoint, it's absolutely an outstanding meeting. So. It
is an enormous informational exchange, and we bring you by every year to recap what you consider the high points and some of the standout information shared at BIF every year. Was there any particular theme around which the discussions revolved, Bob?
Yeah, so the first general session was titled Positioning for the Future of Beef Production, and really looked at things that we ought to think about and do to improve our selection systems and ultimately the animals that we produce for the beef value chain to meet consumer demand moving forward.
So did any sage ideas or inspirations come out of those sessions?
One of them was focused on efficient red meat production. Michael Janot from Elanco came and spoke. Elanco, as many folks know, have a large feedlot benchmarking and closeout database. One of his main points was really we need to do a better job defining efficiency. And so if we think about efficiency in the value chain, things like feed conversion ratio don't necessarily do a very good job of communicating that effectively. And he highlighted the need actually for understanding economic efficiency. And so, given the resources we have at hand, either purchased or leased or owned, whatever the case may be, there's an economic value associated with those. And we need to make business decisions such that we leverage practices and management that enhance our ability to capture value in our system. And sometimes measures like feed conversion sort of don't paint the picture as clearly as we need it painted to really optimize and become more sustainable in our business. So they can kind of drive you to make decisions that are short-term versus long-term.
So what did he propose be focused on more intently then?
Yeah, so one of the things that he really focused on was sort of efficiency of carcass weight gain and to a specific body fatness or empty body fat percentage as a really focused sort of set of metrics to get at what our market target ought to be, or a set of market targets that we ought to focus on and figure out how to get efficiency measures that reflect those economic opportunities for us to become more profitable. So, and I think, as we look at our business, sustainability as a term gets thrown around a lot, but certainly profit is part of that in a context that we need to think about. And certainly carbon use fits into that picture. And in many cases, our measurements of production efficiency, we can translate easily into economic units to get to economic efficiency. And so his point was we should make that effort to go down that road.
You say there was a session that dug into the value of quality. What was that referring to? Genetic quality, beef quality?
Yeah, so it was. That's actually the very next speaker that followed Mr. Janot was Mark McCulley from Certified Angus Beef. He pointed out some of our trends in terms of consumer demand across the beef sector, domestically and internationally, for higher quality beef. And I think in his case, when he referred to quality, he meant quality grade. But we can actually broaden that out. And I think a number of the points that he made surrounded the idea of understanding what it is our consumer wants, and we should continue to listen to them and evolve our understanding of consumer preferences, which is, I think, a little separate sort of distinction between consumer demand, right? We can think about demand as an economic term, but certainly quality grade and enhanced attributes in terms of marbling have certainly driven a lot of value into the beef business and attracted more consumers around the world, over the last couple of decades, and we've reaped the benefit of that in our production system. And I think one of his main points was there's not a lot of downside risk to that in terms of our production system. Certainly adding top-line dollars into our business makes a lot of sense, and satisfying customers that are willing to pay, in many cases, a substantial amount of money for our product, making sure they're happy is probably a pretty good business strategy, right? So not any rocket science there, but he really, I think, did a nice job sort of articulating our continued need to focus on that as one of the product attributes we bring to the table, and then think maybe some things about other messages about our product in terms of how we produce it and some of the transparency issues that maybe go with our sustainability messaging. So,
and there was a specific session on beef production sustainability. Now, this is a term that's bandied about a lot.
Right.
Was added definition lent to that in this session?
Yeah, so Sarah Place, Dr. Place is a former faculty member at Oklahoma State, now works at National Cattlemen's Beef Association, is their kind of lead sustainability officer. And she really came at it from a perspective of how should we as beef producers position our product relative to other competing products, particularly in one of the ones that she referred to as sort of the vegetable-based diet substitutes for meat. She did a really nice job sort of breaking out not only the differences between sort of resource allocation to produce those vegetable-based products as one consumer alternative, but how beef actually competes very favorably against those products from a sustainability standpoint. And the idea is that, for much of a beef animal's life, and certainly if we think about cows and the value chain, the products that they consume are not ones that are directly consumable by humans, right? Which is the rumen of a beef cow provides a great resource converter or up converter, if you will. That's a term I've heard recently that I really like because it describes, taking this low quality product, forage and grass and standing tall grass prairie, whatever the case may be, and making it into a high-quality, humanly consumable product. Our protein competitors in pork and poultry, in many ways, compete directly against humans in the food chain because they consume, since they're monogastrics, feedstuffs that humans could consume. And so from that standpoint, the upscaling or upconverting of feedstuffs by beef actually puts them at a very favorable position in terms of sustainability. And so she talked a fair bit about that. And then some of the kind of resource allocations that have happened over time in our protein sectors in terms of how much additional products in terms of grains and feedstuffs pork and poultry industries consume, say over the last 20 or 30 years versus beef. And when we start measuring out system-level inputs relative to protein sustainability, beef looks really good because we now produce a lot more product from a lot fewer cows. And in fact, her numbers suggested we need maybe 30 million more beef cows to produce the same amount of product as we did at peak consumer demand, or consumption rather, per capita consumption in 1976. We meet that same level of beef production with a lot fewer animals. So that because we become more efficient when that improved efficiency, as I think many of the speakers would agree, makes us more sustainable.
So the tone of that presentation may lend some reassurance in these days where there's interest, if nothing else, in such things as lab-produced meat or plant-based meat.
Right. So those don't take advantage of big blue stems standing out in the prairies of Wabaunsee County, for example. And that's a message that we need to do a better job communicating to our consumers, because I think many of them they think we ought to just feed them corn or something, right? So.
Bob, you said you did want to touch upon one more theme that was discussed at the BIF. It got into value-driven information. Now, what did that entail?
Yep. Exactly. So the second day's general session focused a fair bit around data and information. And one of the main speakers in that session was a gentleman by the name of Wade Small. Wade's the president of AgriBeef's livestock production division, which AgriBeef's a large integrated producer in the Pacific Northwest. They grew out of primarily a cow-calf and farming operation into a position feedlots, and then subsequently, because of their large feedlot, had an opportunity to engage in the packing business. And so now are kind of viewed as one of these informationally and vertically integrated examples in our business. He mostly pointed to the idea that in the digital age that we live in, consumers now have access to a lot more data and a lot more information about the products that they consume. And so he talked a little bit about not only internally how they use information in their business management, so as they look at how do we optimize the value of and the profit of our production system, since they control, in many cases, the seed stock, the cow-calf commercial sector, the feedlot sector, and harvest. How do we maximize the efficiency and profitability of that system? And so part of the solution to that is sharing information up and down the value chain. He pointed to that, but he also pointed to the need for that information to make it to the consumer. So as part of their system of branded products now, there's messages and information that go along with that product. And he sees that as a growing concern in our business, that as consumers become more aware of animal welfare, health, antimicrobial use, other sustainability kinds of issues in terms of feed inputs and feed resources, that we do a better job communicating our systems of production. And consumers actually want to know about that. There's been little discussion about whether or not they make strategic decisions in their purchasing, but they want to know that information. And I think that speaks very much to the sort of call for transparency across our business. And his argument was, we see it internally. How might we as a business move to a broader adoption of those kinds of ideas?
One more thing we'll mention, actually a couple. We won't get too deep into this, but there was another theme that was talked up, and it's rather intriguing. Who will own the beef cattle industry? What was that referring to?
So that one actually, there are several speakers. Marty Robb is one of the speakers, and he has a extensive background actually in the swine industry growing up and as a young professional. And so he talked a lot about the transition of the swine industry from small farrow to finish kinds of operations, so integrated but small family farmers to now a much more corporate sort of setting and an environment, and some of the changes that happened and some of the signals that came down the pipe that people ignored and resulted in pretty swift and dramatic changes in that business. So he talked about the needs for sharing information and understanding how the value chain is connected, and responding to those signals not only in the seed stock sector, but certainly as we move animals through the chain, that we understand how those genetics work and strive to meet a variety of customer demands, really. The other part was really the ownership piece, sort of got extrapolated to data. And so for those in the audience that are familiar with the crop side, of course, precision ag has generated huge volumes of data, and now becoming a fair bit of concern, maybe driven out of some of the social sites like Facebook and Twitter and others about, well, who owns the data and what are the appropriate uses of that data? There was actually a really good panel discussion. Folks from across the beef production sectors spoke about data ownership and data use and sort of the issues around who owns the data and in many cases of subsequent intellectual property that comes from the decisions or systems built off of that information. So that was kind of an interesting and I wouldn't say alarming, but something that people ought to think about in terms of, as you collect data and sort of send it off somewhere, what use of that data do you have long term and who owns it and what can they do with it? So an interesting bit.
Yeah, that's still to be sorted out.
Yeah, absolutely.
On all fronts. Frankly.
Yeah, right. There was lots of questions and perhaps not many solutions driven at that point. But I think everybody left with a much clearer understanding of the homework that we need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Do want to mention one more thing, Bob, for it's part of the BIF proceedings every year. Producers of the year are identified, including the commercial producer of the year. And this year, a Kansas operation was selected for the national honor.
Yes, that's right. So I think one of the great pieces of BIF, the organizational goal is to really promote the adoption and use of selection and genetic information. But there's a recognition system that goes into that as well. And so each year, a committee selects on behalf of BIF a seed stock and commercial producer of the year and some other awards as well. But as you mentioned, Kansas outfit, the Woolfolk Ranch from near Protection, was selected as this year's BIF commercial producer of the year. So, and they were nominated through the Kansas Livestock Association. So hats off and congratulations to Kent and Tyler and their families. They've got a really interesting operation down in southwest Kansas and part of Oklahoma and do a great job using the information in terms of EPDs and selection index and making good production decisions to build better beef.
Hats off to the Woolfolks and the Woolfolk Ranch there in Comanche County near Protection down along the Kansas-Oklahoma border. The commercial producers of the year as designated by the Beef Improvement Federation.
Great big honor. Yep.
Yeah, and all in all, a very resourceful event it was, Bob. And you say if anybody would like to view or listen to the information that was presented at the annual meeting, that's available to them.
Right. So each year is one of the I think the really important industry support operations around BIF. Shauna Hermel and her crew does a great job sort of covering the event and providing some summaries of the various talks. But if you go to bifconference.com, you can find summaries of all the talks and the PowerPoint slides for many of them. And then if you want to listen and view a number of those presentations, go over to Facebook and find the Beef Improvement Federation Facebook page. And in that timeline, there's the Facebook Live recordings. I know all the keynote talks and many of the committee session talks as well.
Well, it's a program rich with information. Producers take full advantage of what they passed along at the BIF. Go to that website, bifconference.com. Bob, while we have a moment, and before you get away, we do want to slip in a quick plug as well for yet another meeting that K-State will be sponsoring, and that is set for the 15th of August, right here on the campus. Cow-calf producers, once again, the target audience here. This will be the 2018 K-State Ranching Summit. This was launched just a couple of years back, and you tried to cover quite some territory with these summits, right?
Right. So a couple of years ago, our beef extension team here at K-State got together, and we wanted to put together a meeting really focused on sort of the business side and the skill set of managers in beef producing operations, primarily cow-calf operations, but certainly topical content suitable for a range of other producers, whether that's seedstock or stocker background, feedlot, et cetera, but really focused on sort of the business and management skills of our producers. And we've tried to bring in a variety of speakers to hit a number of different topics. In this year's program, really focused on sort of trying to get our head around where we need to be in 2030, which is really only 12 years away, which is kind of, every time I say that, I have to scratch my head. It's a little scary that we're approaching 2030 as quickly as ours. Seems like we were just fighting Y2K problems, right? Our computers not too long ago, that was quite a while ago now. So.
Now, time is short today, and we don't have the chance to walk through the entire agenda of the program. We're going to do that at a later date here very soon, but in that the 15th of August is not that far away, you are encouraging producers to register for this year's summit as soon as possible, right?
Right. So we've got an online registration portal built. If you just go to ksubeef.org and see there's under the events tab and listing over on the right-hand side, the KSU Ranching Summit. And you can register online. You get a little discount if you get that done by August 8th. We'll take walk-up registrants as well. Discount if you bring two people from the same operation. So encourage you to go check that out. Register early, though. That will, if you're planning on coming, help us do a good job making sure we've got meal counts and the like done. So if you'll do that by August 8th, we'll be deeply appreciative.
Quickly, early registration by August the 8th, $40 for individuals, $70 for two attendees from the same operation. So take advantage of those breaks by registering early, no later than August the 8th. You can take care of that and find out more about the specifics of the agenda at the summit at ksubeef.org. And again, we'll be covering those details a little further down the line. Bob, thanks for going over all of this with us, and we'll talk again soon.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Along with us on Agriculture Today, Bob Weaber, cow-calf specialist, K-State Research and Extension. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today, and welcome back. Eric Atkinson here. Now, today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, under that plan announced yesterday by the Trump administration, farmers growing soybeans, corn, sorghum, wheat, cotton, milk, and hogs will be able to apply for tariff aid payments sometime this fall to offset the impact of lost trade markets. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue, stressing that President Trump continues to support U.S. farmers, announced this aid package of up to $12 billion for agriculture, which will be available through three separate programs. The Secretary called the trade response a short-term solution that would give the president time to work on long-term trade deals that would end the retaliatory tariffs. Now, Perdue said the $12 billion figure is directly in line with the estimated $11 billion impact of illegal tariffs on agriculture. The funds, he says, will help producers deal with the costs of lost markets due to retaliation by other countries. One of the programs through which the aid will be available to producers is called the Market Facilitation Program. This will come out this fall with more specific details and enrollment. It will specifically provide payments to producers who raise soybeans, corn, sorghum, wheat, cotton, milk, and hogs, which USDA officials have said have been most affected by the retaliatory tariffs. Here's more on this program option from the USDA's Rod Bain.
now that USDA has announced its market facilitation program as one way to help some tariff-impacted producers via incremental payments. Work is underway to advance the program and move towards a sign-up. Agriculture Department Chief Economist Rob Johansson told reporters Tuesday that calculations are ongoing in terms of payment rates.
We are working out the specific details, and we'll be publishing that as part of a rulemaking action in a couple weeks, and that will have our estimated rates.
Farm Service Agency Acting Deputy Administrator Brad Carmen says sign-up for the program will not start immediately due to staff preparation and training. However,
we anticipate a simple sign-up. Basically, for 2018, for the crops that the Secretary mentioned, producers will tell us production, we'll multiply it times the payment rate, and give them a payment based on that formula.
With USDA officials targeting Labor Day to have specific details on the market facilitation program and sign-up in place. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Now, the second of the three programs will be the Food Purchase and Distribution Program. That'll buy products such as beef, pork, fruits, nuts, rice, legumes, and milk that then will be sent to food banks and used for other food aid programs. And the final program of the trio would be a trade promotion program tied in with the private sector to help open up more export programs. This sounded similar to the Market Access Program and the Foreign Market Development Program. However, USDA officials did not say whether this new program would be directly linked to those established programs. They're all authorized under the Commodity Credit Corporation, which means the USDA will notify Congress of the initiatives, but the Secretary does not need congressional approval. The USDA, again, will have to draft rules in the coming weeks detailing exactly how the Market Facilitation Program will be paying producers. That would include estimated rates that producers would be paid. It will likely be after Labor Day before program details will be fully available to producers. The USDA's Assistant Deputy Administrator Brad Carmen went on to say that producers would likely be required to provide their production numbers for this crop year to enroll in the program. That would then be multiplied by the payment rate. Quoting Carmen, "We need producers to harvest to know their production before we can calculate a payment." And Greg Eibach, the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs at the USDA, said that department officials have been analyzing options since April when the president asked the secretary to look at mitigation measures. Eibach later added that he hoped the programs would help producers deal with some of the financial stress they may be facing, but he and others, again at USDA, also repeatedly said they believe these programs will be a one-time effort and will not be renewed. We'll be talking more about what's known about these new program options and what's not known to date and how producers might prepare for them, particularly that market facilitation program, with K-State Risk Management Specialist Art Barnaby on tomorrow's broadcast. The dairy industry might be making progress in convincing the federal government imitation products should not be labeled in dairy terms. Todd Domer reports here this new direction was announced by the Trump administration.
U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Scott Gottlieb recently said his agency soon will begin enforcing regulations that define milk as an animal product, not a plant-based food. The National Milk Producers Federation applauded Gottlieb's admission that the labeling practices of many plant-based dairy imitators violate long-standing federal rules. The dairy group sent a letter to Gottlieb last year complaining about the lack of enforcement. It pointed out FDA's inaction has led to consumer fraud due to the inferior nutrient content of non-dairy products compared to true dairy counterparts. National Milk Producers Federation President and Chief Executive Officer Jim Mulhern said there has been a proliferation of imitation products falsely labeled as milk, yogurt, cheese, ice cream, and butter. Mulhern said he hopes FDA will rapidly move to take enforcement action. I'm Todd Domer.
And acting EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler announced yesterday his agency has approved sorghum oil as a feedstock under the Renewable Fuel Standard as an advanced biofuel and biodiesel product. The EPA, sorghum industry leaders, senators, and congressmen held a roundtable discussion yesterday afternoon to talk about the importance of the decision for ethanol plants and for sorghum producers. The national sorghum producers pushed for more than 2 years to get sorghum oil as part of the RFS. EPA initially proposed the rule last December, noting in its proposed assessment that as a biodiesel product, distillers' sorghum oil had the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 82% compared to a petroleum diesel product. That achieves the EPA's threshold to be considered as an advanced biofuel. The CEO of National Sorghum Producers, Tim Lust, said that the ruling would allow some ethanol plants in the plains to get back into using sorghum as a feedstock because they'll be able to sell their oil as well. The EPA also noted that distillers' sorghum oil right now is still a relatively niche market product with the potential to produce 12 million to 21 million gallons of biofuels from the oil annually. Still, there are 9 ethanol plants already extracting oil from sorghum, and other facilities will be able to do the same. That's a look at today's agricultural news headlines. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. Now one final break. And when we come back, the nuances of operating a farm pickup with K-State's Gus Vander Hoeven. Stop, look, and listen.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen. This is our state, Kansas.
Old Red drove under its own power to the dealer, like an old cow goes to slaughter.
That's Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
I bought it as a farm truck. It's a silver, birch gray Silverado with a short bed. It's a two-wheel drive. I've always said that's all I need if I use my head. I traded Old Red in as a clunker a long time ago. And a clunker it was. The tires were slick, and we pulled the knobs off the radio as my son had an old truck without. Old Red drove under its own power to the dealer, like an old cow goes to slaughter. Then it stood there on display. They painted clunker on its side, as if they had no shame. But true, a clunker it was. It's scary to drive a new truck on the farm. Even loading it up with crowbar tools, etc. It's hard to do. It scratched the bed. All that was a long time ago. We're now 9 years later, and a good 55,000 miles. The truck has history. The different dents and scratches tell the stories. One long scratch on the side is from a grandson guiding me through a tight spot. Oops, Baba, I didn't see that. You can't depend on grandsons all the time. Then there are the many small dents from loading firewood. Bumpers are no longer steel. They dent easily when driving into a massive rock standing in the way at a creek crossing. It's a farm truck. And when I wanted to drive out to the farm with Dutch guests to show them what our Flint Hills look like close up, I took the truck. I apologized for the dust inside, but the AC works. The three of us fit in comfortably. We found the safety belt for the middle seat and strapped in. I talked Flint Hills as we drove out. I pointed to the rock formation along the road. Always fascinating, and it makes you wonder about the power of roots. They had earlier visited the Flint Hills Discovery Center, which is a very good introduction to our Flint Hills. On we drove to Carnahan Road and on to McIntyre Road. At our gate, I stepped out and opened it, being careful not to drop the post into the poison ivy. The first brome field mowed and harvested, looked like a harvested wheat field. Close to the ground some green sprouts are showing. They will now come up after a second good inch of rain we had earlier that morning. I could feel the wheels slightly slipping in the fresh mud on top of the native stone road, farm road. I calculated quickly where I could drive with my guests to show them what I wanted them to see, the top of the hills, but also the creeks. I drove through the woods and crossed at the beaver pond. The low spot I know is solid. We drove the 1-acre field along the bur oaks, which I had planted many years ago. Then, as I climbed out of the woods, I sped up and slid into the 5-acre brome field, all surrounded by woods. It's a good field, but sloping field. Back down, I made a quick decision to cross the crossing and circle the big open hay meadow. I wanted my family to experience the openness of the big field, now all mowed and harvested. That was a mistake. I should have stopped, got out, and pulled away the big broken branch which had dropped in the crossing. But I didn't, and I turned in without speed. The moment I hit the center and low spot of the crossing, I felt the wheel slip and lose grip. I tried, but I was sliding, slipping. I used my farm truck instinct. Don't stop, keep going. It was not a funny place to be, as the crossing is a straight drop-off into the creek. As I slid forward, sideways, backward, I suddenly met the big tree. Bonk! I didn't even stop to look, but used the heavy bonk to slide backwards into the creek bed. All the time I knew exactly where I was. My passenger sat silent, gripping the dash. I now could turn back where I had come from, and lo and behold, the furiously spinning wheels had enough grip, just enough grip, to climb back out. And suddenly, I was back on high ground. My passengers gave me a big grin and thumbs up. They didn't say anything, and I casually drove back. Thinking back to the moment, it was a bad place to get stuck, and neighbors were not close by. I'm thankful that I was able to climb out, but I remembered the heavy bonk. It was a solid sound, a solid tree. On the way out, we drove into the setting sun. To end the day on a high note, I swung onto the native hay meadow, now also mowed and hauled off, and followed the grassy hillside to the flat top of the meadow where a few old buffalo wallers are left. There we stopped and looked around. 360 degrees. Beautiful country, with new grass coming soft and green. While they looked and took photos, I casually looked at my recent bonk. It all can be fixed. It's just a farm truck doing its job. Driving on a farm is different than driving on the highway.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on rural Kansas. And with that, our Wednesday edition comes to a close. As always, we appreciate you listening in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.